So I'm convinced you're maybe the lawyer, right? I mean, you just came up out of nowhere after he like completely took all of his comments down. And your name is Colonial Vampires. Okay. I'm sure you're aware, but Founders Archives was built by historians with degrees from schools you're bashing. So are they wrong? Yes, they are. I mean, they're wrong because they got higher educated. Is the history wrong? No, I'm not saying the history is that the Revolutionary War didn't happen. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that the reason they didn't know God is because the higher education was getting in the way of that. That's what I'm saying. And I've read enough of their letters that you can say that. Now, your friend, or maybe it was you, the lawyer from Dartmouth, was saying that it was just happenstance that the first amendment was thrown in there. Well, no, it wasn't. Do I think that the founders, it's all about knowing the founders' background. And you only can know that by their own personal letters. So the historians just haven't done a very good job, have they? It's almost like they've pick and choose which parts they want to teach in the universities, because they leave that whole pilgrim part out pretty much. That doesn't seem to apply at all, which is why so many people are ignorant when it comes biblically to our history. And the fact that the pilgrims brought the Geneva Bible here, I mean, that's truly where it goes back to. But I would say the biggest problem with the 1776 founders is they were higher educated. And that's why so many of their letters, they do discuss God. They'll even discuss Jesus. They discuss enlightenment, though, too. It's like they were always struggling. And I think the higher education gets in the way of a personal relationship with God. And the Holy Spirit is all about having a personal relationship with God. Something the higher education in this country would never, ever understand. Because again, it was about enlightenment to them, about raising in some sort of consciousness, and yet they never seemed to be able to have the relationship the pilgrims did with God. And yet the pilgrims were the ones that sacrificed everything to come to America. It started with them. All the 1776 founders, they didn't struggle coming here. They came here, but I would say a lot of them were more here for financial reasons. I'm not saying they didn't believe in freedom. They believed in freedom. I mean, I totally believe the Constitution was written, and especially the Declaration of Independence was written with the hand of God. I mean, Benjamin Franklin himself didn't. He was the atheist, and he said all that praying we did while we were at war seemed to be helping. So maybe because they were fighting all the time before the Constitution was written, and so he was the one that suggested that they go to church the next week and pray, and then maybe they'll be able to sit down and come up with a Constitution, which they did. So I think that God was there was, and there was things that happened to George Washington that were strange visions he had, and things like that. But as far as them believing that you could know God, they were too higher educated. They didn't believe that. And I would say it's a direct result of the higher education. So am I saying that that the historians are wrong? No, they just are picking and choosing what they decided to want to teach in the universities. And the biggest portion being left out is how, the 1620, because that's all where the whole foundation with God was started. It's the only reason this country's been protected. That's the only reason. Otherwise, God's hand would have been lifted on this. We would have been succumbed to our enemies a long time ago. No, it's just if you go into the universities, they're going to pick and choose. I don't think any of the universities or anybody really goes on archives.gov and reads any of that stuff. There's so much of it. But if you really want to try to put the pieces together of the history, that's the best way to do it. Because, yeah, the letters are on there, but all of those letters aren't taught in school. They're put together by certain historians that are all also higher educated, right? Who also don't believe in God or understand that part of America's history. So I wouldn't say necessarily they are wrong. They're just very misguided. And really have misplaced the most important part of what America's history was all about. So, of course, that's why there's so many higher educated with their noses in the air that think that they know everything, don't ever want to admit when maybe they're wrong, most especially if maybe they're wrong up against somebody that doesn't have all their education. I mean, it's really a problem with the higher education group. I mean, it doesn't matter what area. It seems to be an ongoing problem. Yeah, and most especially when it comes to leaving the whole history of God, the Geneva Bible, the Pilgrims, all of that. When you leave all of that out, it just shows that the historians, let's say, not necessarily the founders, but the historians definitely had a bias to only portray America's history in a certain liberal, socialist, godless way. So that's what makes it wrong.